What's up? Welcome to Journey in the Self. I'm your host, Sarah. So we wanted to do a continuation of the show series, Donald Trump Insider or Establishment. You see a picture in the window, and here's a video of Diddy, Puff Daddy, or whatever you want to call him, in the midst of one of his freakouts. And this is what do they call it? Freak party, whatever. The point, though, is I want to show a connection between these, and this information was shared in an audio that was included in the evidence that was introduced during the trial. So we're going to play just a little bit of this just to establish some connections. And you will see the relevance of it once we start getting into the information. So as you know before, we were going through the information provided by Timothy Fitzpatrick in his publication, The Fitzpatrick Informer. And we went through parts 1 and 2, which documented some of the connections and also verified the prior connections that we made with Trump, Donald Trump, the Rothschild connection, how they assisted him through his bankruptcy, how they helped him along with the CIA and the Jewish mafia in particular, how they helped to give Trump access to start him in his real estate empire. And so it was the first casino that he had, which was the Taj Mahal, if I'm not mistaken. He acquired that from the Mary Counter Paint Company, which was a front company for the CIA, and was also a partnership with the Rothschilds and when Meyer Lansky, the head of the Jewish mafia. But you will see that there are connections there which help to illuminate this whole thing, and also, again, connect us to the P. Diddy trial, which is very important because we're only being shown basically what I consider to be a sacrificial pawn in P. Diddy, because we see that this behavior is rampant, and this is behavior that he's learned from other people, some of who are very prominent in Hollywood. And if you're paying attention, you'll know who I'm talking about. If you don't, please do read the book by Neil Gabler about who invented Hollywood. And it was to say that Mr. Jeffrey Epstein, Meyer Lansky, the Rothschilds are all connected to that. Okay, so before I get into the video, I also want to bring to the forefront, and we've shown these pictures before, but just to enter some of these into the record again. Yeah, let's see. Just put it up this way through image files. Can I do that? No, it's not letting me do that. So just bear with me for a minute. We'll try it a different way. Just go. You should be able to see it on the image file. Okay, never mind. Okay, we'll skip that for now. I'll figure out how to bring that image in later. But we'll just go to the video, and I want you to see, and we'll stop it and pause it at a particular place. I'm probably not going to play the whole video. It's only 2 minutes, but I want you to, in particular, to see a familiar face. I'll stop it when we get there, and then we'll let the rest of it roll.
Is no longer just about Cassie. What started as a disturbing yet narrow case focused on her testimony has now spiraled into something no one saw coming. This isn't tabloid fuel anymore. We're talking federal courtroom shifts, leaked summaries from insiders, silent audio playbacks, and an avalanche of resurfaced clips that are basically...
We will go back again. You'll see a familiar face here.
An avalanche of resurfaced clips that are basically dragging half of Hollywood into the mud. The internet's working overtime, the streets are buzzing, and the people involved, yeah, they're probably sweating harder than they ever have. So here's what's just happened. After weeks of the prosecution laying out Cassie's story, the alleged abuse, the infamous freak-offs, and Diddy's controlling behavior, things took a sharp turn. According to courtroom spectators and online leaks, prosecutors have moved beyond Cassie. The focus has now zoomed in on audio recordings, and not just any tapes. These are supposedly graphic, explicit tapes involving Diddy, Will Smith, and Meek Mill. Yeah, this is not Twitter hearsay anymore. This is reportedly being played in open court. It all started when video footage from a hotel lobby was shown a few days ago. No audio, just visuals. Everyone assumed that was as far as it would go, but now insiders are saying that audio was played behind closed doors and it left the entire room frozen. No phones allowed, no journalists recording, just complete silence. One source described the clip as male-on-male graphic and undeniable, the kind of silence that doesn't just happen unless what's being heard is serious. And if that wasn't enough to shock the room, it gets deeper. After this moment, new witnesses were announced. And they're not randos looking for clout. These are ex-Bad Boy artists, former staff, people who worked under Diddy, toured with him, stayed at his party. These are people who've seen things from the inside. People who might have stayed quiet for years but are now ready to speak up under legal protection. One of those voices, Dawn Richards. You might remember her from Danity Kane, one of Diddy's former girl groups. She testified recently and later was spotted looking visibly frustrated and drained, caught on paparazzi cam while leaving court. Insiders say her testimony backed Cassie's story. She straight up admitted that Diddy did horrible things. That's not gossip. That's court transcript material. And then there's Diddy's daughter. If you needed a moment that really hit home.
Okay. So we'll close out of that and we'll stop the screen for a moment. And I want to see if I can bring up the audio, or excuse me, the video files again. No, we can't. But going to open the picture files and we will show them on the screen. There we go. You see Donald Trump, P. Diddy, and Melania Trump. Another picture of P. Diddy, Donald Trump, and Melania. And finally, a picture with Mr. Trump and the infamous Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, so we're going to go back now, having established that connection through picture evidence. We'll now go back to our article and begin reading from there. Okay, this one, again, we're reading from the Fitzpatrick Informer, written by Timothy Fitzpatrick back in 2016. Okay, and here it says, you'll see basically a chart here. It says Donald's Dirty Deeds Department. And there you see at the top, Richard Nixon. And it says that up in the top right, Roy Cohn gained fame as Joseph McCarthy's legal hitman and as a close advisor to President Nixon. Cohn later counseled Trump and numerous mafia figures, but most suggestive of his role in this network are the many ties, rumors, and accusations suggesting a central role in sexual blackmail of political and business figures. This is Roy Cohn. It says Trump's villainous political network was handpicked by blackmail artist Roy Cohn. Here, that's Roy Cohn Central. It says Cohn was Trump's longtime lawyer, mentor, and closet confidant. He has passed away. Just Cohn introduced his protege, Trump, to both Stone and Manafort, Paul Manafort, in the 1970s. Here's Roger Stone, Paul Manafort. We talked about Roy Cohn in the previous part 2. And we also discussed Roy Cohn in the book, Jeffrey Epstein, Did Men Tell No Lies? Says Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort recently succeeded in ousting former manager Corey Lewandowski, strengthening the grip of the Cohn network on the Donald. As a lawyer, Manafort ran the torture lobby, which represented a variety of brutal third world dictators. Trump's surrogate, Roger Stone, got his start in Richard Nixon's notorious creep operation. Stone is an admitted swinger, and his friend Manafort made headlines by liking a New York City swinging and bondage club on Twitter. Was this the nexus that brought the two into Cohn's inner circle as a young man? The question is asked. Okay, so we'll start with the article. Trump mentor Roy Cohn, a pedophile protector who blackmailed his protege at Plaza Hotel Blue Suite, is asking the question. Um, is asking the question basically as to whether Roy Cohn took the opportunity to blackmail Donald Trump, um, assuming that he might have been part of the parties that were held in the Blue Suite, some of which we've talked about in the book Jeffrey Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Lies. It says the bullish New York attorney Roy Cohn was a quintessential false opposition operative. And one thing I wanted to say before I go more into this book, because it says false opposition operative. And I just want to point out it's my perspective currently that some of what we see going on in terms of the positive things that the Trump administration is doing, such as the banning of the COVID-19 vaccines for children and pregnant women, the appointment of RFK Jr. and some of the positive things he's done in that regard. My perspective is that these positive things, if you will, are being done to distract and take the attention away from the darker things that are occurring. So while people are applauding the posthumous, if you will, decision to ban the vaccine, way too late, because mind you, many people seem to have forgotten that Trump was president when the vaccine mandate was occurring. And while Anthony Fauci was making all the rules in terms of the nationwide shutdown, recommending everyone stay in the house, requiring everyone to get vaccines. Trump participated in the censorship that was going on. When anyone voiced any opposition to the vaccine or provided facts about the nature of the vaccine and the things, the contents of the vaccine, the effects that it had. Indeed, even as I had done programs that I had posted on YouTube, illuminating some of the research that some of these doctors who had researched the vaccine and had issues with it, including some funeral home people and forensic doctors. All that information was banned, was taken down. People's careers were destroyed. But Trump was the president there, during that time. So it's interesting to me, how the it's being publicized pretty heavily about how uh, the vaccines mandates are being rolled back. But now I said posthumously because a lot of people have already died because of it. And Trump did not take that action when he was president, when he had the opportunity to do so, where it would have had a more positive impact. People have already died now. So I think that these things are going on now to detract from what's going on. What we see happening now is, for instance, one of the things is a major transfer of wealth with the bill that is going through Senate and the House right now, uh, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. He wants to pass it as soon as possible, which will cut social services, cut Medicare, potentially cut Social Security, and the cost savings from cutting these social programs will be how the tax cuts for the wealthy get financed. So another grift, another transfer of wealth taken from the poor to give to the rich. So just pay attention. Okay, so we'll continue. Sorry about that detour, but I felt like that needed to be said. Okay, so we'll start. The bullish New York attorney Roy Cohn was a quintessential false opposition operative working under Senator Joseph McCarthy. He prosecuted and persecuted communists as part of the establishment-controlled Red Scare, as well as homosexuals, despite being a homosexual himself. But how he was so successful, achieving a huge amount of federal indictments as McCarthy's aide and attorney for the U.S. Department of Justice, was likely due to a dirty, dark secret of his: sexual blackmail, especially of the pedophile kind. Biographer Burton Hirsch reveals about Cohn: when New York attorney John Klotz began to investigate Roy Cohn on behalf of a client, declassified New York government files and spade work by a private detective substantiated the allegation that there was indeed a blue suite at the Plaza, Suite 233. Roy Cohn was providing protection, Klotz discovered. There were a bunch of pedophiles involved. That's where Cohn got his power from: blackmail. Not only was Cohn tied to the Nebraska GOP pederast ring, Franklin scandal, as we discovered in part 2 of this series, Cohn was involved in a New York City sex ring run out of a Manhattan hotel that eventually became owned by Cohn's protege, Donald J. Trump, in 1988. Had Trump himself been compromised by Cohn in Suite 233 with some child prostitute, not unlike the way Trump's friend Jeffrey Epstein would compromise elites at his Lolita Island? Katie Johnson, who was only 13 years old at the time, claims to have been lured to one of Epstein's underage sex parties in New York, where she was violently raped by Trump. And there's a question mark there. And I believe we did read her allegation about having been raped by Trump. Detective James Rothstein had an opportunity to have a sit down with the infamous McCarthy Committee counsel Roy Cohn. During this sit down, Cohn admitted to Rothstein that he was part of a rather elaborate sexual blackmail operation that compromised politicians with child prostitutes. Cohn told Rothstein that this operation was being carried out as part of the anti-communist crusade at the time. There doesn't seem to be any proof that Cohn had compromised Trump, although we do know that Trump followed in the footsteps of Cohn, even assuming his bullish demeanor, as well as the two exchanging favors for years up until Trump abandoned his friend after it was revealed publicly that he had AIDS. I hear Roy in the things he says quite clearly, said Peter Fraser, who was Mr. Cohn's lover for the last 2 years of his life, spent a great deal of time with Mr. Trump. That bravado, and if you say it aggressively loud enough, it's the truth. That's the way Cohn used to operate to a degree. And Donald certainly was his apprentice. And here you see Roy Cohn and his protege, Donald J. Trump. Convict Jeffrey Epstein continued in this illuministic spirit pioneered by Cohn in the New York underworld. In the ring, he appeared to have run in connection with Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, which was apparently a proving ground for would-be sex slaves. And the whole notion of anti-communism as saving America was the convenient bait used in a basic Hegelian dialectical system. Cohn was vice president of Rabbi George Sulkowski's Political Action Committee, the American Jewish League Against Communism. This league officially endorsed the Jewish-controlled John Birch Society, which has tentacles all over the alt-right. Not only did Cohn's sex ring help him advance his legal career, it helped him advance Jewish interests, specifically its capitalistic dialectic in the West. Pedophile book on Cohn's sex ring stashed at Watergate? Could the Watergate burglars have been after a pedophile book that contained the names of Cohn's sexually compromised Republican Party and New York elites, which may have included Trump's name? Detective Rothstein also had an opportunity to speak to the infamous Watergate burglar, Frank Sturgis. During this conversation, Sturgis revealed one of the reasons for breaking into the Watergate. According to Sturgis, there was a pedophile book hidden away at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. The book was supposed to have a list of pedophiles on the American political scene. This alleged book, no doubt, would have had dirt on the Democrats too. Fugitive ex-CIA officer Frank Turple has claimed that sexual blackmailing operations directed by the CIA were intensive in Washington during the Watergate era. Turple also asserts that his former partner, Ed Wilson, was coordinating one of these sexual blackmail operations. In a letter to author Jim Tugin, Turple revealed Wilson's modus operandi. Historically, one of Wilson's agency jobs was to subvert members of both houses of Congress by any means necessary. Certain people could be easily coerced by living out their sexual fantasies in the flesh. A remembrance of these occasions was permanently recorded via selected cameras. The technicians in charge of filming were TSD, Technical Services Division of the CIA. The unwitting porno stars advanced in their political careers, some of whom may still be in office. According to DeCamp, Wilson's ring was a continuation of Cohn's. Late journalist and author Michael Collins Piper makes a good case for the Watergate scandal actually being orchestrated by Israelis Mossad to take down Nixon, in a continuation of a takedown of those in the JFK administration still working in government. Interestingly, James Jesus Angleton, Mossad's top ally in the CIA and alleged architect of the deliberately botched Watergate burglary, apparently had sexually compromising photos of Cohn's associate 33-degree Freemason J. Edgar Hoover. Interesting that both of these individuals, Roy Cohn and J. Edgar Hoover, are secret society members, Freemasons, and are both homosexual and apparently pedophiles. Because we do know that is part of the initiation ritual. CIA counterintelligence director James Jesus Angleton proved to be such a loyal asset to Israel and its Mossad that he was honored with a monument in Israel. And this is from the book written by Michael Collins Piper, The Final Judgment. Author Anthony Summers, in his recently released biography of former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, described how the alleged compromising photos of Hoover engaged in homosexual activities, described later in Chapter 7, managed to resurface in relation to the Garrison investigation. According to Summers, he was told by former CIA contract operative Gordon Novel that he was shown such photos by James J. Angleton. Piper illustrates how it was Jewish mob boss Meyer Lansky who spearheaded the blackmail of homosexual Hoover. Summers created it, which makes sense. Summers created a media sensation when he alleged in his new biography of Hoover, Official and Confidential, and on the PBS series Frontline, that Lansky blackmailed Hoover with supposed photos of Hoover engaged in homosexual activity. Could Lansky and his associates have directed Cohn's sex ring? Hoover is alleged to have witnessed dressed up drag with two young. Hoover is alleged to have been witnessed dressed up in drag with two young boys at the Plaza Hotel. Could it have been at Cohn's room 233 pedophile hangout? Daily Mail lies about Trump rape accuser following convenient dropping of her lawsuit. A week before the U.S. federal election, Katie Johnson, the woman who filed a lawsuit alleging that Donald Trump raped her when she was 13 at an Epstein sex party in New York, canceled a press conference at which she was to reveal her identity. The conference would precede the approaching pretrial in December of this year. On November 2nd, Johnson's legal representative, Los Angeles civil rights attorney Lisa Bloom, told a press scrum at her Woodland Hills, Los Angeles offices that Johnson would not be appearing due to fear of her life following threats. I have bad news. Jane Doe has received numerous threats today, as have all the Trump accusers that I have represented. Then, only 3 days before the election, Johnson withdrew her lawsuit against the would-be president of the United States and his longtime friend, Jewish billionaire and convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, who raped Johnson and other young girls while having them play out role-playing fantasies, exactly as the aforementioned Turple explains about the CIA's blackmail techniques. That the dropping of the suit was a huge convenience for Trump in his eventual election goes without saying. Johnson's deposition stated that Trump and Epstein threatened her life and those of the other child victims if they were revealed the crime. It appears that with this decades-old threat, they finally got to Johnson and her lawyer in time for the election. And to the right, here is a picture of Katie Johnson today. The mainstream media was mysteriously silent. Again, which makes sense because we know who the mainstream media is controlled by. Mainstream media was mysteriously silent on the Johnson lawsuit, with the Daily Mail being the main conduit to disseminate information to the public regarding the case. The Daily Mail's last article on the Johnson-Trump rape scandal was published on November 7th, 2016, the eve of the election, with a deceptive headline of exclusive troubled woman with a history of drug use who claimed that she was assaulted by Trump at a Jeffrey Epstein sex party at age 13 made it all up, which was a lie. Notice that the writer of the article headline used all uppercase letters for the lie they told. This despite that the article never conclusively proves that she made up her story. Nowhere does Johnson say that she made anything up. Yet the Daily Mail crafted this politically motivated clickbaiting headline to suggest otherwise. The Mail also slanted the story to suggest that Johnson's claims were politically The Mail also slanted the story to suggest that Johnson's claims were that of a drug-riddled, troubled person. If this is true, it is not an uncommon result for rape victims. In truth, the Daily Mail was counting on people reading only the dismissive headline rather than reading the article and weighing the evidence and deciding for themselves, which too many, unfortunately, people do. Reading on in that article, there is very scant evidence from a conveniently anonymous source that Johnson made up her story. Furthermore, the Daily Mail itself spoke with Epstein procurer Tiffany, who corroborated Johnson's entire story, which just happens to corroborate Virginia Roberts' proven claims against Epstein. It seems the Daily Mail was given a last minute directive, quote, or in parentheses, by my side, question mark, to exonerate Trump. Thus, the Mail's sudden and unsubstantiated dismissal of Johnson's claims. Ironically, child sex procurer Ghislaine Maxwell's Mossad asset father, Robert Maxwell, controlled much of Britain's media at one time. It's likely that Britain's media today is still in similar hands, thus the dramatic U-turn by the Daily Mail in the Johnson case. Adding to the disinformation surrounding this case is the double standard held by Trump supporters and the pseudo-alternative media. Pseudo-alternative media. Interesting. And we've seen evidence of the pseudo-alternative media when in part 2 we were talking about InfoWars and Alex Jones. Adding to the disinformation surrounding this case is the double standard held by Trump supporters and the pseudo-alternative media. Rape allegations, all of them against Bill and Hillary Clinton, are fair game, but any against Trump are off limits. Pizzagate, interference play, or further down the rabbit hole. The spurious anonymous is believed to have started the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. Shortly before the U.S. federal election, Image Board discussion Group 4, Chan Reddit, and the highly suspicious anonymous is alleged to have broken an elite Washington, D.C. child sex scandal dubbed Pizzagate. Of course, it only involves Democrats, even though the GOP has a history with child sex rings like the aforementioned Franklin scandal in Nebraska and Washington, D.C. It's too early to determine right now the veracity of this conspiracy theory. However, in those conspiracy circles have completely bought into the theory blindly without investigating too deeply. There are inconsistencies in the story. The fact that the story was automatically believed shows the mindset of Trump supporters and those of the alt-right. They are as controlled as their opponents on the left, who also believe anything spoon-fed to them by leftist talking heads. That is the absolute truth. The timing of the release of this scandal, thanks to WikiLeaks, hacked leaked emails, is also suspect, as the rape case against Trump was gaining momentum, as well as articles like mine showing Trump and Clinton's connections, child sex ring of Jeffrey Epstein and his Mossad asset Ghislaine Maxwell. The right wing has no interest in The right wing has had no interest in WikiLeaks up until Trump announced his running for president, at which point WikiLeaks seemed to suddenly shift its focus against Democrats. Time and thorough investigation will reveal whether Pizzagate is legitimate or merely a distraction. There is also the possibility that Pizzagate is true, but is limited hangout, or perhaps Pizzagate is connected to Epstein and his Mossad-run child sex ring. For the record, I believe it's the latter. I'll amend that. I believe it's because I don't believe in one thing or the other. I believe that Pizzagate is true and is connected to Epstein and his child, Mossad-run child sex ring. Yeah, that's one of the mistakes that many people have. They choose between options, and if one's true, another is false, not taking into consideration that both things may also be true. Okay, so We've come to the end of part 3. Here you see uh, Katie Johnson when she was in her early teens. She was the child sex victim that was discussed in the story. And here we see all the sources that Timothy Fitzpatrick used as a basis for the story. So here, the historic face-off between the Kennedys and J. Edgar Hoover that transformed America. David Paul Collins, The Ghost of Roy Cohn, where Donald Trump learned from Joseph McCarthy's right-hand man in the New York Times. It's about his relationship with Roy Cohn, he being Donald Trump. Information in the Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper, The Missing Link in the JFK Assassination Conspiracy. A Daily Mail article. Woman who says Donald Trump raped her when she was 13 abruptly cancels press conference after facing numerous threats that left her living in fear. And then I'll just skip on. The Vigilant Citizen, Pizzagate, how 4chan uncovered the sick world of Washington occult elite. And again, it's Timothy Fitzpatrick's opinion and mine that both Democrats and Republicans were involved, because it's not about which side of the political spectrum you're on, it's who's controlling things. Okay. So we have a bit more time, so perhaps we will go ahead and move on to part 4 in the series. Okay. So here, let's take a look at this. The Judeo-Russian Shabbat mob ties to Trump. And here to the right of Trump, you see Semyon Mogilevich, Jewish Russian mob boss, Rotem Rosen, Trump partner, Lviv Lieutenant Chabotinik, Alex Sapper, Trump partner, son of Tamir Sapir, Lviv Lieutenant Chabotinik, Lev Lviv, King of Diamonds, oligarch with ties to Putin, Netanyahu, Trump, and Chabotinik, and Felix Sater, Trump partner, son of Mogilevich underboss Mikhail Shervasky, and Chabotinik. And this one is how Trump fits into the global neocon Likud Shabbat organized crime syndicate. Talmudist, Zionist illegal state of Israel is currently officially run by gangster Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel's organized crime-run Likud party. Likud's roots trace back to Jewish terrorist organizations like the Stern Gang and Irgun, which later evolved into the murderous Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. These modern-day zealot organizations, with the aid of international Jewish criminals like mob boss of bosses Meyer Lansky, helped establish the Zionist state of Israel in 1948. After years of criminal activity in America with Jewish mobsters like Mickey Cohen and Lansky, Irgun terrorist Menachem Begin will be rewarded by the Zionist-controlled West by becoming Prime Minister of Israel in 1980. He entered the national ministry through the Likud party, which he founded in 1973, through a blending of existing right and left wing parties in Israel, almost all of which agreed in their Zionism. Although Likud is based in Israel, its founding and ongoing political success exists because of the loyal laboring of a global organized crime syndicate, which is even composed of some non-Jews. Shabbat Mafia. This syndicate, which appears to have been reorganized as a religious front called Shabbat Lubavitch, a mystical Orthodox branch of right-wing Judaism created in Russia, conducts much of its legal activity in and through the United States of America and Russia, whether it's running drugs, arms, carrying out fraudulent business and real estate transactions, sex trafficking, extortion, or assassinating undesirables. It sometimes wears the mask of the intelligence community and exists among Democrats and Republicans alike. No American president, save for JFK, has dared to cross it. Late FBI director and closeted homosexual John Edgar Hoover was so controlled by the syndicate that he publicly claimed that the mafia did not even exist. Lansky is alleged to have photos depicting Hoover in homosexual acts, particularly one showing Hoover performing fellatio on his lover and assistant Clyde Tolson. Once again, we see elite Jews using sexual blackmail in their systems of control and dominance. Again, remember how we started this broadcast tonight with basically some sexual rituals that P. Diddy was engaged in. So hopefully you can see the connection that we're alluding to here. Like Hoover, current U.S. President Donald Trump appears to be in total submission to the same international Jewish crime syndicate, which, without any shred of opposition from Trump, is directing U.S. foreign policy, naturally favoring Israel, as well as protecting the usurers who control the entire financial and political establishments. Trump's administration might as well be renamed the Goldman Sachs administration, which is absolutely true, particularly of his first administration, because there were quite a few people that were part of his administration which came directly from Goldman Sachs. With Trump's obedience to the syndicate as a result of a sexual compromise at the hands of Israel's Mossad, discussed in part one of the series, his familial ties to Zionism and international Jewry or personal opportunism, Trump's administration can be said to be nothing short of being Zionist and Jewish occupied. What Likud wants and America will bring, regardless of which figurehead poses as the American leader. And I would say that the current the current apparent rift between Trump and Netanyahu, I think, is just for show. Likud's Oded Yanon agenda for Trump. It seems the Likud agenda for Trump is mainly for war and the advancement of U.S. foreign policy in the interests of Likud-run Israel and the Jewish Masonic overlords. More and more, we see the escalation of the threat of war against Middle Eastern countries, supposedly not already subservient to Israel and its Oded Yanon plan. The balkanization of the Middle East, with Jews gaining more and more control, namely Iran and Syria, which just happened to be two of Russia's biggest Soviet Arab satellites. Where the Zionist Bush regime finished in 2008, Afghanistan and Iraq, the Zionist Trump regime has begun. However, Iran's Jew-friendly leadership could broker a backroom deal with international Jewry to keep America out of a war, but they need Likud-controlled Trump in power as a hedge. As for Syria, Israel and international Jewry seem content letting both the United States and Russia tear it to pieces. It makes little difference to Jewry if Syrian pipelines are run by Russian Jews or American Jews. Bibi, Trump, and Bibi being Netanyahu, Bibi, Trump, and the Kushners How much closer could the ties between the Trump family, and Israel be than King Likud Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's having slept in the bedroom of Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner? But that's just the start. Let's examine the Jewish tentacles Trump has joyfully suckled leading up to and during his presidency. Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, had a personal relationship with the Israeli prime minister. Netanyahu visited Charles Kushner, a real estate mogul, in his office, and also spent time at a Jewish school financed by the family. Netanyahu even included Charles Kushner on a list of wealthy American Jews likely to contribute to the Likud primary elections a few years ago, reported the New York Times. We've only scratched the surface here of the relationship between Bibi and the Kushners, but another interesting association is between Netanyahu's disgraced former chief of staff, Ari Haro, Trump Russia-backed Channeler, Eric Prince of the Mossad-like Blackwater, now academic, and Jewish billionaire Vincent Chenguz, who was once a large shareholder in the SCO Group, the parent company of Cambridge Analytica. See, Cambridge Analytica is the data mining company currently under investigation for its involvement in getting Donald Trump elected. I thought I had heard that name before. Trump is tied to Cambridge Analytica in multiple ways, but conflicts of interest are only the beginning, as the country is known for its use of sexual blackmail and other dirty tricks in achieving its objectives. Outrageously, Trump has his supporters fooled that he could use a Likud Jared to broker peace in the Middle East. The only kind of peace Trump could be interested in is a one-sided deal benefiting racist Israeli settlers and their criminal Likud government. And wouldn't you know it, Trump and Kushner interests were named finalists earlier this year to build the FBI's new headquarters. They're actually going to replace the old headquarters dedicated to Lansky crime syndicate operative and FBI Director John Edgar Hoover. Remember that Hoover was connected to the Roy Cohn pederast ring with which both Roger Stone and Donald Trump are implicated. Fittingly, the Trump interest, Vornado Realty Trust, is a major investor in 666 Fifth Avenue, 666 Fifth Avenue, the flagship skyscraper of the Kushner cause. Considering, Brother Jamal says, considering all of the dysfunction that seems to surround Donald and Melania Trump, remember her background as an escort and nude model, and as a renowned con man, Trump equal Diddy party. Indeed. Finally, the Trump interest, Vornado Realty Trust, is a major investor in 666 Fifth Avenue, the flagship skyscraper of the Kushner cause. Vornado is run by Jew Steve Roth, who has been advising Donald Trump in his plans to revamp the nation's infrastructure. Roth also served as one of Trump's top economic advisors during his 2016 election campaign. Despite his fake conservative sympathies, Roth is liberal through and through, donating money to gay marriage causes, likely provoked by the fact that Roth's own son is gay. This moral compromise exists with Trump, too, who has flip-flopped on such important issues as abortion and gay marriage. To confirm this, Trump attended the gay wedding of Roth's son, Jordan, in September 2012. Chief Ursurus at Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, was also in attendance. Trump's consistent flip-flopping, I should point out, does not seem to be due to Trump's confusion or trying to appease both sides. Instead, it appears that the about-facing is deliberately done as part of some kind of shock and awe confusion doctrine, where nobody can figure out anything, especially Trump's opponents. Sodomy and usury together at last. Brother Jamal says, is that what many people feel that Putin has on Trump, including videos of the child abuse acts? That could very well be. And here you see, I think we've seen this picture before, but just for the record, Jeffrey Epstein's Mossad connected child sex procurer Ghislaine Maxwell with Trump appointed Steven Schwartzman at New Yorkers for Children Spring Gala, April 16, 2008. Man. And I think Steven Schwartzman was also from Goldman Sachs. Trump administration full of Jews. Although Jews constitute less than 1% of the U.S. population, they dominate the Trump administration. They are overrepresented far more than any identifiable group. Dozens of Zionist Jews have been placed in top positions, some of which included, and some of these positions have changed. And again, this was during his prior administration. Jared Kushner, Trump's own son-in-law, David Friedman, ambassador to Israel, Steve Wynn, Jewish casino mogul appointed chairman to GOP finance leadership team, Elliot Brody, deputy finance chairman to GOP finance leadership team, Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer and appointed as deputy finance chairman of GOP finance leadership team, Jason Greenblatt, Middle East Zionist advocate, Steve Mnuchin, Goldman Sachs bankster, Soros Group investor turned U.S. Secretary of Treasury. I will read that one again. Steve Mnuchin, Goldman Sachs bankster, Soros Group investor turned U.S. Secretary of Treasury. I bring that up again to underscore the fact that there is no liberal conservative war. It is for show. And of course, we know Soros is the alleged or purported backer of all liberal activities. Gary Cohn, director of the National Economic Council, David Shokin, director of Veteran Affairs, Steven Schwartzman, chairman of Strategic and Policy Forum, position which has now been dissolved. Other lower appointments: Carl Icahn, casino magnate and syndicate operative, corporate raider. I'll add that from my knowledge. Stephen Miller, staffer. Boris Epstein, special assistant to the president. Abraham Berkowitz, special assistant to the president Kushner. Louis Eisenberg, finance chairman for the Republican National Committee. Michael Glassman, national political director. Reed Cordish, assistant to the president for intragovernmental and technology initiatives. And there are even more Jews president of the Trump administration and mid-lower levels. Of course, the U.S. presidency run by Netanyahu and Likud would have to be disproportionately staffed by fellow tribesmen. Jews also dominate the back channel between Trump and Russia. Here we see the Donald's father, Fred C. Trump, who donated the land for the Talmud Torah of the Beach Haven Jewish Center. (723 Avenue Z) discusses the impressive future with the assemblage at last week's groundbreaking. The Trump family's long-standing Shabbat love. Running alongside the Likud, control of Trump is Jewish religious and mob control. Enter the mystical radical Kabbalist sect, Chabad Lubavitch. I put sect in parentheses because there aren't really any sects of Judaism because Jewry functions as a unified entity, regardless of internal disputes. Trump's ties to the Chabad crime syndicate go back to his father, Fred, a businessman and real estate speculator who had a lot of Jewish tenants and Chabadic handlers. Trump must have felt something special for his Jewish tenants because in the 1950s he donated land for what became Beach Haven Jewish Center and continuously supported its activities throughout his lifetime. The center's current rabbi in Rebbetzin is Brooklyn local Shimmy Silver, who grew up in the Crown Heights Chabad community. Also from Crown Heights are the Chabadniks Samuel Sandy Lindenbaum, high-powered legal counsel to Donald Trump, and to the aforementioned Stephen Roth and to the 9/11 conspirator Larry Silverstein and his father Abraham Bunny Lindenbaum, an apparent Lansky organized crime syndicate operative who appears to have been Fred Trump's handler and confidant. As his father had Bunny Lindenbaum for his fixer, Donald Trump had Roy Cohn, the counsel of the Inside Fix, reads a 2015 Vanity Fair article. Fred Trump's own real estate fortune had been made with the help of the political machine and especially Abe Beame. In the 1940s, Trump and Beame shared a close friend and lawyer, a captain in the Brooklyn political club named Bunny Lindenbaum. Abraham David Birnbaum was the first Jewish mayor of New York, as well as its comptroller during the 1960s and 70s. Beame attended Donald's wedding to Ivana in 1977. Beame was in cahoots with both Roy Cohn and his father, Al, and may have been part of Cohn's sexual blackmail ring. Incidentally, the Trumps profited handsomely around the time Beame's politics bankrupted the city of New York. Donald negotiated the biggest tax break in New York history, worth $160 million, buying up derelict buildings. Donald and Chabad, and on November 9, 2016, after Trump had been elected president of the United States, the Israel press boasted of Trump's relationship with Judaism and the Chabadniks. Trump was one of the donors of the Ruzim Bayan Yeshiva in Jerusalem, the article states. As is well known, Trump's clear connection to Judaism lies first and foremost with his daughter Ivanka, who converted to Judaism after marrying her Jewish real estate mogul husband, Jared Kushner. Ivanka appeared during the election campaign at a Shabbat synagogue in the United States and even came to the Reeb of Shabbat together with her husband. The article goes on to praise Trump as a righteous Gentile, however, he may in fact be Jewish. Kushner's in Shabbat. The visit to the Reeb refers to the deceased Jabba the Hutt lookalike, Rabbi Mendel Menachem Schneerson, perhaps Judaism's biggest failed messiah, whom Shabbatniks believe will come back to the dead, liberate Jews, and make them kings of the universe. Ivanka and Jared prayed at the Reeb's gravesite. The visit was nothing new for Jared, who has long ties to the Chabad syndicate. While at Harvard, Jared was the head of the Chabad house. Furthermore, Jared's ex-convict father, Charles, is also a Chabadnik. It was a Chabad executive director, Rabbi Zalman Grossbaum, who wrote a letter on Kushner's behalf when he faced 18 counts of illegal campaign contributions, witness tampering, and tax evasion. What's more, the rabbi had no problem vouching for a disgraced man who was also caught in the Epstein-like sexual blackmail trap, which involved hiring a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law who was cooperating with federal officials in investigating targeting Charles. Perhaps Charles should have gone to Trump and Epstein for help in this regard. Fred and his wife, Mary Ann, President Trump's mother, died at the Long Island Jewish Medical Center in New Hyde Park, New York. Whether this means the Trumps were Jewish is unclear. Blogger Richard Presser provides sources that tend to show that Trump family are indeed of Ashkenazi Jewish extraction. Wow. If true, the Trumps could have been Hasidics well before Ivanka Trump married into the Hasidic Kushner family. There are many more Trump Chabad connections, which we will continue to explore. I'll have to research that one myself. The Russian connection is actually another Chabad crime syndicate connection. The Trump campaign and its false right support base have been mocking the left-wing media for its claims that Russia meddled in the U.S. election. It's all just Democratic Party propaganda designed to incriminate Trump and the apparently right-leaning Putin regime, the rhetoric goes. But a deeper examination of the claims reveals the truth. Although said media is not framing the evidence accurately, instead of showing that mainly Russian Jewish oligarchs have been meddling for their own personal interests and for the purpose of advancing Jewish geopolitical interests, the left-wing media is framing the narrative as Putin and the Kremlin alone meddling for geopolitical advantage of the Cold War source. It's a gross oversimplification of things which Putin must love because it hides the true goings on. The key Judeo-Soviet oligarch and mobster players in Trump's ascension to power include, but are not limited to, Felix Chevarovsky, in parentheses, Felix Sater, Trump Russia-backed channeler and real estate money launderer fixer, Tofik Arivov, sex pianist and real estate fixer with Bayrock, Lev Levev, king of diamonds, Putin Netanyahu tied Soviet Jewish mobster, Semyon Mogilevich, Ukrainian-born Russian Jewish mob boss, Alexander Meshkevich, Alex Sapper, and Rotem Rosen. Felix Sater, on November 3rd, 2015, Felix A. Sater, a man whom Chabad Lubavitch twice declared Man of the Year, sent an email to Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, describing how the mobbed-up Chabadnik would engineer Trump becoming president of the United States of America and how he would get Putin's team to buy in on it. It appears that this is exactly what happened. Around the time of this email, Cohen and Sater had been working on a scheme to get American sanctions on Russia lifted, as well as a peace plan between Russia and the Ukraine. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the annexing of the Crimea, provoking the sanctions in the first place. The scheming appears to be paying off as now the U.S. State Department is saying there's no need to sanction Russia over its election meddling. Born in Moscow to Jewish parents, Sater became senior advisor with the Trump Organization, following years of working as a fraudster and in a powerful Jewish Russian organized crime syndicate under his father, Mikhail Chervovsky, who was an underboss to Russian mob boss Semyon Mogilevich. On November 5th, 2013, Trump perjured himself in a video recorded sworn deposition when asked if he ever knew Sater. Trump says, "If he were sitting in the room right now, I really don't know what he looked like." He went on to say, "I don't know him very well, but I don't think he was connected to the mafia." Sater went on primetime television this year, stating he personally knows Trump, but ridiculously would not acknowledge that Trump personally knows him. Apparently, Sater's guilty plea in 1998 to his involvement in a Russian mob orchestrated stock fraud scheme worth $40 million was either not enough to convince Trump or Trump didn't know about it. Either possibility is difficult to believe. Two, Michael Cohen from Phoenix Sater. Buddy, our boy can become president of the United States and we can engineer it. I would get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I would manage the process. Looks like it's an email to Michael Cohen from the aforementioned Felix Sater. This is when he's trying to broker a Trump Tower Moscow deal. It's likely that one of Sater's roles with the Trump organization and with Tevik Arif's real estate development firm Bayrock Group was to help Jewish Russian oligarchs, mobsters secure property with which they could then launder their dirty money via various shell companies based in the Netherlands. This appears to have been the Russian crime state's primary use for Trump before he became their shill in the White House. Trump's various real estate projects, many of which were utter failures, contain units owned by a disproportionate number of Jewish Russian mobsters and oligarchs. At least 3 Mogilevich members live at or bought units in Trump Tower. An untold millions upon millions of dollars have been laundered through Trump real estate since the 1990s, and millions more through other ventures like Trump's Taj Mahal casino, against which federal prosecutors levied a $10 million fine, the highest ever levied against a casino, for repeatedly and willfully violating anti-money laundering regulations. Here you see Mr. Felix Sater's card when he was employed with the Trump organization. It's unlikely this Sater will be taken down for either his participation in organized crime or for colluding with Russia to get Trump elected president, as Sater is protected by the U.S. intelligence community, allegedly for his cooperation in ratting out other criminals in his sphere. His cooperation helped him stave off a 20-year jail term on one count. This, of course, is very convenient for President Trump and the mainstream media, as anti-Russian and anti-Trump as it appears to be, will not touch the mob ties of Trump, especially regarding Sater and Semyon Mogilevich. Perhaps part of Sater's immunity involves the media keeping a lid on things. Even liberal commentators are noticing the mainstream's media's silence over Trump's numerous mob associations. An interesting side note about Sater is that as a boy, he and his family fled the Soviet Union and immigrated to Israel before eventually setting their meat hooks in America. It is theorized that Soviet mass murderer Joseph Stalin's true intentions behind the so-called Jewish purges during his reign was to help the Zionists colonize Palestine, similar to Jewish Havara agreement with Adolf Hitler. The Sater family history corroborates this theory, but the Saters did much more for international Jewry than just colonize Palestine. They expanded Jewish crime interests the world over. Here, who was supported to be on the Sorona? I can probably read this if I really focus. The print's very small, and I don't think it's significant enough to read, so I won't try. Tevik Arif, Alexander Mashkevitz, scummy real estate money launderer and child sex and suspected child sex trafficker Tevik Arif is the founder of the aforementioned Bayrock Group, of which Trump and Sater have used to aid their organized criminal activities. When Trump couldn't secure financing from other creditors for his various ventures due to multiple bankruptcies and debt, he turned to his Soviet-born gangster pal, Arif, among other shady dealers. Arif worked for the Soviet Ministry of Commerce and Trade of the former USSR for 17 years before finding his niche as a crime syndicate operative. Although he apparently isn't Jewish, he's a big donor to Felix Sater's Chabad Home Synagogue of Port Washington. Again, we see the ever pervasive Chabad mafia lurking beneath the reins of power. Maskovich honored with Torah School at Chabad Russian Center of South Florida in 2011. In 2010, Arif was arrested aboard a $60 million luxury yacht, the Savarona, where authorities found underage girls and young women from Russia and Ukraine were believed to be used to sexually service prominent people for $3,000 to $10,000 per tryst. Arif, also accused of human trafficking by authorities, was one of 10 people arrested in the incident. A year later, Arif was acquitted by a Turkish court. Keep in mind that Turkey had good relations with Russia and its organized crime syndicate, along with others. 4, however, were convicted but with suspended sentences. Bloomberg reported that others arrested included Russian Kyrgyz, Kazakh businessmen, and government officials. The Israeli press revealed that Kazakh Israeli billionaire Alexander Mashkovitz, a World Jewish Council Congress member, Russian Jewish businessman Telman Ismailov, and a senior aide to Kazakhstan Prime Minister Karim Masimov were among those arrested on the yacht. The investigation began several months before the police raid on the yacht. The Turkish police received information about a crime organization that deals with human trafficking and solicitation. The organization was headed, according to the information, by Taufik Arif, a Turkish tycoon, Donald Trump's business partner and owner of a metal production factory in Kazakhstan and many other businesses in the U.S. and Britain. Arif, dubbed David by his people, was born in Kazakhstan and lives in Turkey since 1994. Police followed his organization for 2 months, documented them with video cameras, tapped their phones, broke into their email and bank accounts. Young Slavic women detained following an elite tryst on the Savarona. The Jewish press article goes on to describe an all too familiar scenario reminiscent of Trump's sleazebag pal Jeffrey Epstein. Russian and Ukrainian models, 2 of whom were underage, are brought from a reef sex party in the Savarona. Okay, so you guys seeing this connection here? Okay, so this is just not P. Diddy. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear. Investigation materials show that a Reef's organization provided escort services to businessmen, young women, some of whom were underage. According to the investigation, one of the businessmen was especially fond of the 13, 14-year-old, and the organization had supplied those girls were brought from Russia into Ukraine through modeling agencies. The investigation protocol includes transcripts of phone calls between Arif and his partners, describing the girls' age, height, and looks. Although Mashkovich denies having been on the yacht at the time it was raided, Turkish reports claim to have proof in the form of receipts that Mashkovich paid in advance for the use of the yacht during the 5-day tryst. Interestingly, Princess Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed, whom I briefly talked about in part 1 of this series as being assassinated by Mossad, had chartered the same yacht at one time. Adding to the implausibility of Mashkovich and Arif's claim of innocence is the fact that the yacht was originally purchased by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey. According to Wyatt Net News, the orgy affair raised a storm in Turkey because any slur on the memory of Ataturk is an offense punishable by imprisonment, which seems to say that Turkish authorities were trying to downplay the entire affair, even if it meant they had to let the guilty off the hook. So revered is this yacht by the Turks that there are calls to turn it into a national museum. Therefore, why let this sex scandal taint its image and run the risk of breaking the law? Through Mashkovich's Eurasian Group, he is alleged to be financier of Trump's real estate projects through Bayrock LLC. And when you know it, Mashkovich appears to be a Chabadanik. In late 2011, not long after he was arrested on Arif's boat with the young prostitutes, Mashkovich was honored with the Torah Scroll of the center of South Florida, which just happens to be Trump's neck of the woods. And here you see it says Trump's chum Arif. Could Trump's chum Arif have been running a child sex blackmail operation like his other chum Jeffrey Epstein? It's quite possible. Arif and Epstein could be part of the same Mossad KGB elite blackmail operation. Interesting. And there's Lviv and Vladimir Putin, and Lviv and Trump. Okay. Lev Lviv, King of Diamonds, Lev Lviv is believed to be the primary financier of the worldwide Chabad Lubavitch Syndicate, a Soviet Jewish oligarch who became rich from blood diamonds in Africa and helping the Soviet satellite of Angola embezzle millions from its people, is close friends with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in partnership with Donald Trump and is tied to Jared Kushner through the sale of a portion of the New York Times headquarters in Manhattan. I'm shaking my head. Because you're seeing, it said that this Lev Lviv, who made his money on exploiting the diamonds in Africa and helping the Soviet satellite of Angola embezzle millions from its people. And it says that Vladimir Putin is a close friend of this dude, who's also a friend of Netanyahu. The reason I shake my head is because of Putin's relationship with a number of African leaders. So some people have considered this to be a good thing in escaping from the influence of the United States. But it could be that they're jumping from the frying pan into the fire. So we'll have to watch that closely. It says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in a partnership with Donald Trump and is tied to Jared Kushner through the sale of a portion of the New York Times headquarters in Manhattan. The deal was done in 2015 through Lviv's daughter Chagit on behalf of Lviv's Africa Israel Investments. Kasowitz Benson Torres LLP represented Lviv's company in the sale. One of his lawyers, Mark Kasowitz, happens to be representing Trump in the U.S. government's Russia probe. Lviv's partnership, Donald Trump is not clear, although it probably has to do with real estate money laundering. Lviv's companies have been under investigation for money laundering for years. An now removed photograph from the Pinterest account of LOD Diamonds USA of Trump and Lviv shaking hands with the tag partnership says there must be something more to their association. The fact that the photograph was removed after inquiry from journalists only feeds suspicion. The Washington Post report that in 2008, Lviv invited Trump to his Madison Avenue diamond store where the two were photographed together. Lviv hoped to work with Trump on Moscow real estate deals, according to an article in Kommersant, a Russian newspaper. The Post went on to say Lviv also has direct ties to Trump through his Jewish-Russian underlings, Alex Sapir of Trump Beirut Partners, Sapir Organization, and Rotem Rosen. The two accompanied Trump during his 2013 visit to Moscow. Lviv was a sponsor of Chabadnik Rabbi Beryl Lazar, the chief rabbi of Russia, who was close with Putin. As with all good Soviet businessmen, Lviv has deals in communist North Korea and China, Sino-Soviet Axis members. Russian Jewish oligarchs own Trump. Because of Trump's repeated insolvency and growing debt, He needed the only available loan sharks in the world, Jewish Russian oligarchs and mobsters. It becomes difficult to distinguish between the two. These oligarchs only came to such a position by looting from the Russian people after Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev's perestroika plot kicked in and allowed for publicly owned resources and businesses to be snapped up by ready and willing criminal leeches. Whew. An overwhelming majority of which happened to be Jewish. The fake collapse of communism in the 1990s allowed for the rise of this criminal mafia state, which has carried on the Soviet tradition of bloody terror. Little has changed in this regard, as has the economic plight of average Russians. And his sources here are these articles and books. When Bibi slept in Jared Kushner's bed, from the Forward, Cambridge Analytical CFO, and Mr. Dirty Tricks. This is in the publication The Week. Christian Family Partner, a finalist for the $1.7 billion contract to build FBI headquarters. No conflict of interest, huh? That was in the Chicago Tribune. Gouvernato Post Roth from therealdeal.com. Fred C. Trump, post-war master builder of the amount of housing for the middle class, from the New York Times. He's just going. You see, I'm just reading some of these just so that you can see that the article is very well documented. So I just wanted to give an example. This is not just stuff that he's making up. He's done a good job, very good job of research. Okay, so we'll end there. That just concluded, I believe it was part 4. So the next time we delve into this, we will go into part 5. But we may take a little bit of a break from Trump. I think I need to go back into some spiritual teachings. So that we just don't get caught up in this, thinking that this is reality. We need the spirituality to help us to be able to navigate these things and to not allow us to be caught up in fear. So I hope and trust that you've found this to be quite informative and that it casts a more clear light on some current events and puts them in the proper context. So I want to thank you for watching. If you're watching live, or if you're watching on YouTube, and then I do encourage you to do that before it gets taken down. And if you want to reach out to me, I do spiritual counseling. For information about that, you can go to my website, which is www.sa-ra.org. So with that, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time here on Journey into Self. What's up?